living in the age of forever wars. The war in Ukraine will soon be 3 years old. Will it ever end? And what might that look like? We sometimes forget that it could have been avoided in December 2021. At that time, Western diplomats chose not to respond to Vladimir Putin's appeal to sit down to confer not just on the ongoing struggle within Ukraine, but especially on the broader question of indivisible security, an important concept inherited from the Cold War, stating that the security of any state is inseparable from others in its region. Most people have been taught, as a matter of common sense, that it is always better to find a way to avoid war rather than allow tensions to boil over into open conflict. So why were there no negotiations in 2021? Shouldn't common sense have prevailed at that critical moment? Perhaps the seasoned strategists of Joe Biden's State Department felt that the larger issue of European security was too big a morsel to chew on. 5 years earlier, Barack Obama, as president, had explained that Ukraine is a core interest for Moscow in a way that it is not for the United States. Despite Obama's caution, a mountain of evidence shows that the Biden administration believed the risk of a destructive conflict in Ukraine was worth taking because the real cost would be borne by Russia. A new taste for risk was born. Hillary Clinton invoked the prospect of a long, drawn-out war that would bring Russia to its knees. The new consensus seemed to be, if this means war, let's just see how it plays out. It should now be clear that Washington's strategists have accepted a curious paradox, that even forever wars that end in disaster tend to be good for the US economy. Why? Because they keep massive industries ticking over. A permanent war effort not only arms the US, it spawns a global market for US military technology. Moreover, countries that wish to purchase the weapons must do so in dollars. That means they, in turn, must provide resources, products and services that boost the US consumer market. The dollars needed to pay for them thus stay at home. But there are even other benefits. Such an arrangement stimulates the American consumer economy thanks to spin-off technologies made available to innovative American enterprises. Silicon Valley, it should be noted, is a child of the post World War II militarized American economy. The creative entrepreneurs and venture capitalists who bankroll them could not have made the basic investment themselves. Only a form of militarized industrial socialism could permit that level of innovation and global success. The logic of the military-industrial complex now extends across the globe, supported by the 750 military bases Washington has put in place to ensure the framework of peace and tranquility multinational enterprises require to comfortably extract the vital resources located in weaker nations. All this tells us that, yes, war may be bad for some, especially for those who end up on the battlefield. But the war economy is good for all the major actors in a militarized industrial economy and all the politicians with a potential handle on power. In our history classes, children learn that the militarized economy created in response to the pressures of World War II enabled the US finally to emerge from a decade-long depression. They don't necessarily learn about what that implied. At the very moment, Major General Smedley Butler, a celebrated war hero, proclaimed in the title of his book that war is a racket, American politicians, economists and strategists were discovering that war can be the ideal source of consistent, reliable profit. Even more significantly, it can become the engine of a successful consumer economy. During World War II, the US not only seized the opportunity to build up its powerful military establishment, it also played the privileged role of supplier to other warring nations who inevitably became its beholden debtors. At the end of the war, the US stood alone at the top of the global economy. Its only rival in terms of potential geopolitical influence, though hardly on the same scale, was the Soviet Union. Thanks to its crucial role in the Allied victory and its relative economic autonomy, the USSR could stand as a credible partner or rival to the US. Because it embraced Marxist economics, the leaders in Washington encouraged an essential ally in the struggle against Germany to assume the dual role of America's ideological enemy and economic adversary. This contrast produced another interesting effect. It allowed the US to promote the theory of capitalism as its national religion, in direct contrast with Marxist atheism. In 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower decreed that the words "under God" be added to the Pledge of Allegiance, a text every schoolchild was required to recite every morning before the lessons could begin. To summarize, the United States learned an important lesson by the end of World War II, that war may be destructive, but in the modern industrial world, it is the secret to a healthy economy. Because that lesson has never been forgotten, wars have become a permanent feature of civic life. The forever wars we've seen, from Vietnam to Ukraine, despite the massive loss of blood and treasure, are always justified as necessary, which has become a euphemism for good. It's true that our leaders still invoke ancient moral values inherited from previous ages that tell us bloodshed should be avoided, murder is a sin, and unjustified war is a crime. But our leaders know in their minds and believe in their hearts that what's good for the economy is good for the nation, as well as their own political prospects. So even though science and history have demonstrated that war may well be a racket, our governments have realized that it's a business that pays. Today, for the first time since the end of World War II, we are beginning to see a general calling into question of the logic that has now brought us very close to the brink of a nuclear holocaust. Unlike other economic activities, wars are inherently unmanageable, especially in the age of technology. Repeated military failures across the globe and the accumulation of massive debt after so much military-oriented spending have sown serious doubts in the minds of experts and increasingly of the populations of our democracies. Moreover, emerging economies across the globe are increasingly convinced that what's good for the US may not necessarily be good for them. As wars continue to unfold in increasingly ambiguous circumstances, politicians and media pundits are today struggling with the idea of a day after. Throughout human history, purveyors of war have been motivated by their vision of what the day after might look like. It was rarely about justice and usually about control. Unlike modern strategists, warrior tribes and nations never imagined war itself as profitable. But all that has changed. Two violent wars are now raging, not to mention others rarely evoked in the headlines, such as the intractable war in Sudan. Because war has now acquired its own justification, we shouldn't be surprised by the failure of today's warrior nations to paint a picture of the day after. They don't even seem to be trying. Is it because of their perception that war will always be good for the economy? Or have they simply failed to notice what others have begun to notice? That war in the modern era will always be, as General Smedley Butler affirmed, a racket.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.